let's dive in deeper into lines. So as we already know, we can draw a line by clicking in here, selecting this option. We can also just press L on our keyboard and draw a line. We can change the points in a line by hitting enter and going into the edit mode. It allows us to add more points in here. And you can always click on the pen tool while you're in the edit mode to add more items to a line. So you can see that this one is now bigger, and it's all still a part of the same line just because we did that. As soon as we added that, we can also see corner radius appear, which allows us to change how rounded this corner is. When it comes to lines, there are other options in here that we can go over. Every layer that we have in Figma is going to have a blending mode, which is usually by default going to be put on pass-through, and it has the opacity. You can hide the layer by clicking in here or going to the layer list and hiding it like this. And the opacity is something that we can just enter in and see how opaque it is right now. Or we can use the little trick that I already shared with you that uses basically numbers that you have on your keyboard from 1 to 0 to change the opacity. Figma always lets you know what you did by pressing something. So for example, I hit 5 and it lets me know that the opacity is now set to 50%. And you can see that that's changed in here as well. So it's just a couple of ways you can control a layer. And this is true for all of the layers, not just lines, so keep that in mind. Lines do not have a fill by default if they're just like two dots in here with a line in between them. But in here, if we add a fill, since it's not a closed-off shape, it still doesn't have a fill. So just keep it in mind. Fill is going to only happen if it's a closed-off shape. So what we can control when it comes to line, it's the stroke. This is the color of the stroke. So by clicking somewhere on this color field, you can kind of change what color it is. You can play around with these options in here to do the same. In here, you're going to see a hex code. If you don't know what hex codes are, what colors are, and how we work with them with design, take a look at our colors course. And in here, since it's the color of the stroke, you can actually affect the opacity in here as well, which means that if you decide to add multiple layers of different colors that are going to blend together, you can in here control the opacity of the whole layer, while in here you're affecting the opacity of that particular color that you've chosen. Another thing that we have in here when it comes to strokes, it's how they're positioned. You're not going to see a difference on a line, but when I draw a shape and add a stroke to it, you're going to see the difference. And in here you can see the stroke width, which is now set to 11 pixels. So you can see that the line seems to get bolder and bolder as I change this number into a bigger one. You can also change the ends of this line, so you can make this end an arrow or something like this, or a circle. You can round it, so you can see the right one is really sharp, the left one is rounded. You can maybe do the same thing for this one, or you can switch it into a line arrow like this. Line arrow is going to be controlled with the actual width of the stroke, so just keep that in mind. It's going to get bigger as you increase the stroke. And finally, you can go into more advanced options, which is something that you're going to see a lot in Figma. If three dots like this appear or like this, it usually means that there are some additional stroke settings or whatever option you're working with settings that you can enter. So one thing that you can do with strokes is change the stroke style from solid to dash, which then opens up more options for how long the dash is and how long the gap is between the dashes. So if I make this a little bit bigger, you're going to see that the dashes actually have a wider gap between them. Since these are put at round and not square, they actually feel a little bit longer, and you can control this in here. So now the edges and all of the in edges of this dashed line actually appear a little bit smaller because the end actually happens at the exact line. It's not happening like this, and it's not rounding it like this. So just some settings to keep in mind. If there are some joints which we now don't have, you can actually control them in here. And one thing to kind of play around with is, let me just add another dot in here. So you can see that. And you can see how this little edge changes based on what I select in here. Okay, so that should be it for lines, since stroke is the only thing that you're actually going to play around with when it comes to lines.